6 of the fantasy football season. Here's a few defense DST units I would start this week. The first one, the Chicago Bears. So this Bear DST has been one of the best units in all pro football. In the last couple weeks, they've really gone out there and had good performances. Week 4 versus the Rams, 18 points allowed, 3 sacks, a fumble recovery, interception. In week 5 versus the Panthers, 10 points allowed, 4 sacks, an interception, and 2 fumble recoveries. So this week, good matchup versus the Jaguars. Give up the 9th most fantasy points to DSTs on the season. I know last week Jaguars went out there, put on a monster performance, no doubt about it. But this Bears secondary is great. In coverage, they've been good. And they're a team that's been getting off to good leads over the last couple weeks. And the defense doing the rest. So this week with a good matchup for Chicago. And they've been a sound unit for the majority of the season. Giving up mid-teens, low 20s at most this year. They're definitely a defense I would start this week. The next DST I look to start the Denver Broncos. This Bronco defense, 3 weeks in a row with double-digit fantasy points, and they're the reason the Broncos have won 3 games in a row. And this team's pretty much on built running the football, playing good defense, and Bo Nix being a good game manager so far this season. Week 3 at Tampa Bay, a great offense. They locked them down, 7 points allowed, 7 sacks, an interception, a fumble recovery. Week 4 at the Jets, 9 points allowed, 5 sacks, a fumble recovery. And then last week versus the Raiders in week 5, 18 points allowed, 3 sacks, 3 interceptions, including a pick 6 for 101 yards from Patrick Surtain. So when you got a main guy like Patrick Surtain who can lock up a team's number 1 wide receiver, and we know this Charger team really don't have a true number 1. I guess Quentin Johnson is in number 1 with Ladd McConkey being obviously a slot wide receiver. But this Denver Bronco team, they get to the quarterback, they get sacks, and we've seen it the last couple weeks where they've got 15 sacks in the last 3 games. So Justin Herbert, offensive line, isn't great for this Los Angeles Chargers team. And they don't have a lot of good weapons on the outside. So I think Denver, once again, another home game. They go out there and they have a great performance. And their must-start defense this week, the next DST, is the Buffalo Bills. So the Buffalo Bills have a pretty decent matchup, I believe, versus the New York Jets. Give up a lot of fantasy points to DSTs, but this Buffalo Bill team, they get to the quarterback. They could go out there and make some plays. And that Houston Texan game, I know they gave up 23 points, but had a sack, an interception, and a fumble recovery. And this New York Jet offense has had trouble the last few weeks moving the football. They only scored 9 points versus the Broncos in week 4. And last week it was tough for the Jets, where they had nothing but to throw the second half of the game. Down 17-0 to begin, and Rodgers had 3 interceptions. So this week, I think Buffalo could get pressure on Rodgers. He's not 100% with his knee. He's been taking big hits. And this Jet O-line, they're rolled as well. They got good veterans, no doubt about it. But some of these guys are at the back end of their career. So I think this pass rush could get to Aaron Rodgers. And like I said, the Jet run game the last few weeks have been non-existent. So they're DST. I would start this week. The next defense, the Philadelphia Eagles. So the Eagles off a bye week, getting healthier. And they got a great matchup versus the Browns. They give up the 4th most fantasy points to DSTs on the season. So I know this Philadelphia Eagle team, they didn't do anything all season defensively, but it's a 1-week streaming use and a defense that could go out there and make some plays. I think they could put up a decent performance. Week 3 at the Saints, 12 points allowed, a sack and interception. In week 4 at Tampa Bay, 33 points allowed, 2 sacks and a block kick. So like I said, for the most part this season, they're giving up a lot of points. Is this Philly defense and not creating turnovers and making big plays. But there's still a defense I believe could go out there, get a few sacks on Deshaun Watson, cause a few turnovers because he's just a bad quarterback this season. And I still have confidence in defense that can help owners. Start this week in the 5th and final defense DST I look to start is the Pittsburgh Steelers. So a great matchup this week at the Las Vegas Raiders, a slam dunk matchup. And the Steelers defense for the most part this season's been solid, giving up anywhere from mid-teens, low 20s at most this year. So the last few games, week 3 versus the Chargers, 10 points allowed, 5 sacks. Week 4 at Indianapolis, 27 points allowed, 2 sacks. And week 5 versus the Cowboys, 20 points allowed, 2 sacks, 2 INTs, a fumble recovery, and a block kick. So the Raiders give up the 5th most fantasy points. We know Devontae Adams, he's not playing anymore for the Raiders. He's either going to be a trade or he's just going to sit out until he's traded for Las Vegas. And this Steelers team, led by TJ Watt, Fitzpatrick defensively, I think they could cause a ruckus in this ball game on Gardner Minshew, and O'Connell, whoever's going to start this ball game this week for this Vegas Raider team. So I like Pittsburgh as a DST to start, and then possibly a top unit this week. So that's a few defense DST units I would start for week 6 of the fantasy football season.